Regine Jessica Buell, your host for this podcast. For our second episode, we invited two young professionals who have encountered ASEAN and have worked on human rights issues to share their impression, experience, and their hopes for ASEAN as a region. With that, I am actually so glad and excited and thrilled to be joined by two very wonderful and interesting people. So, first of all, I'd like to introduce them. I'd start off with Lini Zurlia. Hello, Lini. Lini is an Indonesian queer feminist activist. She has been involved with issues of women and sexuality, democracy, and human rights in Indonesia for many years. She graduated from Jakarta Islamic University and she is currently serving as an advocacy officer of ASEAN Soji Caucus. Aside from her daily responsibility work with us, she is also a member of Arus Pelangi Board of Advisory until 2022 and a member of the PurpleCode Collective and the co-founder and festival director of 16 Film Festival. So hello, Lini. Nice to meet you.
Hello, hi. Nice to
Hi.
meet you as well. And thank you for having me, for having
Thank you
ASEAN Segi
also.
Campus, actually.
Yes, thank you for your time. And now I'd introduce our second guest for today. She is from Vietnam. She's also a YouTube sensation, I think, and joining us all the way from Vietnam and from her very nice neighborhood, um, Linh Nguyen, who is formerly a reporter and a content producer for the Vietnamese language service of the British Broadcasting Corporation. She lived in Bangkok for 3 years and covered multiple stories regarding the Vietnamese diaspora worldwide, including the ASEAN region. So, Lynn focuses on human rights and socio-political issues, and she was born and raised in Vietnam but was educated in New Zealand and the United States briefly. She is currently pursuing her master's degree in public policy at Fulbright University Vietnam. So, hello, Lynn. Nice to meet you.
Hi, nice to meet you all. And thanks for having
Hello.
me today.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Lini and Lynn, for your time tonight. And this episode is actually so exciting because it's about expectations and reality, and also I guess relating it also to the youth and our careers, and hopefully being able to connect to the millennials and the Gen Zs as well. I guess to start off, well, I am actually intrigued by the two of you. I want to ask you both, how did you start your career now? I mean, what made you decide to pursue your chosen career or your advocacy?
All right. So Lini had the prayer in the background. I don't have electricity, but
Yeah,
the neighborhood totally
actually,
blackout. But
it's
I'll
so
start.
funny. Before we started, it's actually funny. We were setting up a little bit, and then we were so surprised. Everything blacked out from Lynn's end, and we're like, "What happened?" And then she told us that, "Oh, it's actually we there's no electricity in our place right now." But we were so impressed because she was able to improvise, and we're able to see her now.
I'll
So
try. I'll try. But I guess I can say that because I'm a journalist in this case. I'm sharing my experience as a journalist covering human rights issues. You know, about the Vietnamese, but also in ASEAN region as well. So I can say that I have chosen journalism because I believe in values like honesty and truth. And I was born and raised in Vietnam, and growing up in a communist country, there are many things that I later realized that I weren't supposed to know, or they didn't tell me on purpose. And so,
like, can you give us some examples?
oh, the
Oh,
electricity is
yeah!
back. Great. Hey guys, I'll
Thank
close the window.
you. Thank you, Vietnamese electricity,
I
electric
guess
company. you for
I guess that
cooperating
was
with
so
us.
interested in my story. They're like, we had to have lights for her and fans and
And
AC on.
it's so yes, it's the timing is so good. I mean, I just asked you a question and like,
I
I
know.
mean,
Yeah. They're like, they need to see her face as well.
yeah.
So yeah. So well, things like the boat people.
Hmm.
I didn't get to learn a lot about boat people. Those people who were fleeing from Vietnam after the Vietnam War. I
Yes.
didn't get to learn much about them or the re-education camp that
Mm,
some of them had to go through, 3 to 10 years or even more. Especially those who were from the South government. Um, so the loser side, I would say, in the history. So feeling quite betrayed
because
after
you
learning
didn't
so
get to know
much.
about those things. Yes.
Yeah, that I didn't know, and I'm still in the process of learning. So I decided to pursue journalism because I think I need to pursue my own truth. And so and like most journalism students, BBC was the dream.
Yeah.
So as soon as before, I think 2 months before I graduate from university, I was accepted for a position with the BBC in Bangkok. So
Wow.
just yeah, flew to Bangkok, and and then I realized there was another value that is also important to me: humanity. Humanity. And it's not Homo sapiens. It's not about the human race. It's about the benevolence, the kindness that we all have, but some tend to forget. So that's how I get to become a journalist that working on human rights and social political issues.
That's very nice. Thank you for sharing, Lynn. How about you, Lini?
Yeah, that's a lot of experience. Thank you for sharing with us, Lynn. Me myself, I think I had started the activism
Mm-hmm.
when I was in the college. So back in 26, 27. So my background was, born and raised in a very traditional Muslim family. So I was, wearing hijab from the very small age, very early on my age, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then I studied Islamic in Islamic educations from the I think from the middle school, high school, and my college also end up at the Islamic university.
Jakarta. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, so I really, I think half of my life I I've been a very Muslim person, yeah. But I over the time I questions myself, and a lot of questions all over my head, and I need to questions all of those things. And then that was when I start join the female student club in the university. And then I got involved with this club, and then found the feminist Muslim scholar literature that bring me to the something that enlightened me, that is very different from Islam, that that my parents told me, or
Yes.
my teachers taught me, right?
Mhm.
So yeah, uh, that's how I started, and then end up now as a queer feminist activist
Yes.
after
Oh.
decades.
After
So
years of being educated in the Muslim, I mean, in a Muslim
yeah,
traditional way, when you
yeah,
entered
very
the
much so.
university, when you
Yeah,
entered the university, you had that chance to see different views, and it
very much
prompted
so.
you
Yeah.
to pursue a different, or at least explore another path, which is what you're pursuing now.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
oh,
What a journey, right?
yes.
Very,
On the
it's
journey,
very personal, but
yes, yes,
again, personal is political, right? So it
yes.
started from very personal experience.
Yes. And I think it really has to start personal, because before you move forward, it has to hit you first, personally, before you start doing something. I guess now that you're doing your own advocacies and you're pursuing your own careers, I would just like to ask you then, and since we're talking about the working group for an ASEAN human rights mechanism, I want to ask you then, at that time when you were just starting your careers, or when you had that, how do you call it, an epiphany, when it comes to the things that you're pursuing now, I want to ask you, when you first heard of the word ASEAN, then what was your first impression? And as the years passed, did it ever change, or is it better now? The right now that now you're doing like an advocacy work because of your work or your experiences, and eventually did this first impression change throughout time, Lini?
Okay, I can start.
Yeah.
My first impressions was, ASEAN,
Mm-hmm.
non-interference diplomacy way, or what so-called ASEAN way.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's only focused on the economics and trades, but doesn't care about the political or rights, civil rights development, or human rights fulfillment, or well, it's actually doesn't care about what people really need in the region.
Mm-hmm.
They only think about the how can the sovereignty and the economic growth in the ASEAN, in the region. So I think that was the first impressions, and with the very um diverse and different political landscape in the region, some of the states very pseudo democratic system, in another part of the countries are very monarchy, authoritarian monarchy system, and then in another part of the country is controlled by the military. So it's very, the political situation is very diverse, very different.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
um and we cannot push the language of the fulfillment of and enjoyment of the human
Human
rights
rights. Yes.
due to that different political situations. I guess
Mhm.
that's my impressions, and it doesn't change until now. It
Okay.
became worsening.
So you feel right now it's really more on pushing. I mean, the sovereignty pushing. I mean, human rights then is not a priority, or it's something that is not in the top of the list.
Yeah, correct. That's my point of view as an activist, but I think
Mhm.
Lynn has another point of view as a journalist, right? To
Yes.
see
How about
how
you, Lynn?
it's, yeah.
So mine is a bit different. Well, I would
But
say
that's why we love
innocently,
this podcast. I mean,
innocently, the first time I heard of the term ASEAN was probably when I was like 10 years old,
oh,
watching Sea Games on
mhm,
TV.
mhm.
That's when I have a concept that, oh, actually, Vietnam belonged to a group called ASEANs, and then see all sort of people with different costumes and with different culture and languages competing. I thought that was kind of cool. We actually have a community we belong to, and some somehow signify strength and unity. At the same time, diversity and the richness of culture. And so, I was innocent back then. But when later, of course, when, I grew up and I get to study abroad and I get to see through the lens of the Westerners.
Mhm. Yes.
especially through the Americans and the New Zealanders. Um, yeah, they see us differently. They clump us into what they call a third world countries,
Mhm.
third world region. So it's totally different. To have a really the right concept of how about who we are, and how do we look like to other people. And yeah, later I get to learn what Lingy just said. The complexity of the political system is very different, but at the same time, it's somewhat similar in the way they're trying to be control and silencing people. Um, so, but but yeah, I guess my perspective about ASEAN definitely changed, but for the better. Um, in the sense that I get to understand what it what it really is, what the reality is, and accept the complexity of it, and see what is good and what we can improve. I still see the unity, I still see the strength, I do see the richness of culture as a strength. But definitely there are a lot of things that we can work on.
I appreciate both views that you just presented. I mean, it's coming from also a perspective coming from the inside as a member of the ASEAN, and how you see ASEAN as a whole or as a group, and then eventually also looking at it in the perspective of others who look at ASEAN and how it is as a group. But I'd like to think also that it's really it's a progress. At first, of course, ASEAN was just its aim is to unite Southeast Asian nations at first, and then also build something common among all of them, so that it would have a stronger vote, or it's a stronger block than just countries that are represented by different, I mean, states that are represented by different people. But once you come together as a group and be an ASEAN, then it could be a louder voice or a bigger voice for the world to hear. I mean,
And
that thank you. Yeah.
yeah, I just want to add that, and definitely why we pursuing those ideas that sound quite foreign to us, like things like democracies or human rights, and LGBTQ and things like that. But at the same time, I feel like we need to embrace our culture. To the Westerners, to certain groups, certain people. I hope they are the minority. They still see us like primitive people. You know, they still see us
And
like you
not.
guys don't know, and yeah, but in the sense we know we embrace what we have, and just because we're pursuing something new, it doesn't mean that what we have, what in our culture is outdated
Outdated.
or
Correct.
backward. Yeah.
I agree. Well, thank you for that. That's a very good point. So, as millennials then, or as part of the Gen Z, how do you think then, since we talked about ASEAN and perspectives about ASEAN, how does it then affect lives of the youth in the ASEAN region? Or do you think this is something that's very much do you think that the youth could relate to it, or it's too far fetched yet? What do you think? Or since we're talking about the youth and relating it to people also who are in the younger generation, and considering that the views that you have shared a while ago about how traditional you were raised, and then eventually you had a change in perspective and in views on different things, then I want to ask you then, do you think the ASEAN is relevant now to the youth, or is it relatable, or could it relate to its issues then?
Yeah, oh my God, this is very hard to be answered. Is this relevant? Well, I think
Do you think
if
ASEAN
we,
is relevant to the youth
yeah,
nowadays?
yeah, I think if we saw the programmatic by the ASEAN Secretariat, they are aware how important to include the youth group, and then they some sort of allocate budget for the youth development. But
Mm-hmm.
the questions really are they really really involve the youth with, meaningful participations of the youth itself?
Mhm.
That's the questions that we need to,
Address
criticize.
criticize.
Yeah. And then if I I can say that youth movement or young people movement should be beyond ASEAN itself,
Mhm.
because ASEAN is only governmental body and intergovernmental organizations, right? And they will only focus on what they really think important in their perspective,
Mhm.
while I think most of the youth group or young people movement push for better conditions of, say, democratizations in the region. A lot of movement driven by a youth group in Thailand, in Myanmar, in Indonesia, in Malaysia, for instance. But then again, that's what ASEAN doesn't seem recognize it
Recognize it.
as an
Recognize.
important stuff to be in the top list, right?
Mhm.
So I think as a youth group, we need to move beyond the ASEAN
Mhm.
itself. We
Mhm.
can still see that ASEAN, yes, exists, and we can still push our agenda for
Mhm.
more inclusive and better ASEAN. But we
Mhm.
can also pursue another way. Um, we can call it as an alternative way or alternative regionalism that
Mm.
Asia beyond
Okay.
ASEAN, that Timor Leste is also Southeast Asia and they are not part of the ASEAN, right? And then there are youth group, young people who are inspiring in Timor Leste. So I think, yeah, I will keep it that way, that
Mhm.
keep it ASEAN there and push the inclusive ASEAN agenda, but let's also pursue another way to, to strengthen the youth voices or young people movement.
That's a very good point. Thank you for that. Lynn, how about you, Lynn? What do you think?
Yeah, I kind of agree with Lini that we need to go beyond ASEAN. Back to the questions, like how ASEAN can really affect the lives of the youth. I mean, I mean, like I met a lot of ASEAN kids when I was in the United States,
Mhm.
but they won't identify themselves. Oh, I'm ASEAN.
ASEAN, yes, of course,
I'm a
yes.
Cambodian American. I'm a Filipino. I'm a Indonesian. I'm a Vietnamese.
Not
You know,
necessarily ASEAN.
yeah.
I
So
belong to the ASEAN region. Or
yes, so the identity it ties really strong to the nationality, not the regionality. Um, so I think instead of focusing on what ASEAN can do, maybe we need to expand the connection. Basically, what Lini said, and think about the Milk Tea Alliance. It's not
milk
within
tea alliance.
ASEAN. Yeah, Milk Tea Alliance. It's between Hong Kong, Taiwanese, Myanmar, Burmese, and Thai, and so they use the somewhat part of the cultures to connect for,
Mm-hmm.
and advocate for political issues, political. Oh, it's so cute. Yeah.
Hello, your dog is with us. Hello,
So
Lily's dog.
so I think we shouldn't really limit ourselves
Limit
within what
ourselves.
ASEAN
Yeah.
can do,
Mhm.
because at the same time, Lini said it, like, what you guys really can do for each
Yes.
other.
Yeah,
Like, usually
I actually also
need
like.
we need
I
the
also
foreigner,
yes.
the external outside of ASEAN to really actually create some sort of difference.
Yeah.
You know, so yeah, that's my put.
All right. Thank you for those answers. I mean, wow. And it's the first time I've heard of the Milk Tea Alliance. And now I'm also just trying to. Oh, that's an interesting. That's an interesting topic. Maybe we could include that in the other episodes. Thank you for that, Lynn. Now, I guess from your work experience in the region, then, as a journalist for you, Lynn, and as a feminist activist, Lini, what do you think then now are the, relating this to my question a while ago, what do you think are the strengths and weaknesses of ASEAN? And do you think these strengths and weaknesses are felt in the region? Although you have already mentioned that a while ago with the youth, but you also have other insights when it comes to other sectors, especially women and equality.
I can go first. But I have to ask for that dog's name, Liddy. So cute. Um,
Lenny,
so
what's your dog's name?
Mocha.
Mocha,
Mocha.
so
Mocha.
adorable.
She's
Well,
Mocha.
he looks. The color is also mocha. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Hello,
Oh,
Mocha. Welcome to the show. Welcome to ASEAN People
we have a
Speak.
third guest.
Yes, he's our special guest for tonight.
Yeah. So like I said about the strength, I guess the diversity, the complexity, and the richness of culture
Mhm.
and things like that. But the weakness is definitely the non-interference rule they have, and it seemed like everyone is for themselves. Every nation is for themselves, and they don't really the idea of the ASEAN community. I feel like, to be brutally honest, is non-existent, in my opinion. I think it only exists during
Why
Sea Games,
so?
Asian game or World
Oh,
Cup.
okay. When it
When
comes
Vietnam
to
got into the World Cup final, like, yeah, the only representative from the ASEAN. I'm like, that was one time they mentioned it. But and aside from that is the competitiveness, the
mm,
competition between among the countries, and it doesn't really help. Just turn us against each other when what we need to look out is for the other big guys
yes,
outside the region trying to take advantage of us. So and I think they know. I think everyone in the ASEAN know that. Just just again, everyone is for themselves. So what can we do to make them pay attention to the right things and actually make changes that actually create impact? So that's my put.
so that image then of being part of a collective voice instead of just being so individualistic, but in this sense per state. You get what I mean? Did I get it correctly, Lynn? That it 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 it's more of now being aware of being part of one region instead of competing against each other, or doing better than the other one.
Yeah. Well, it's complicated. This is a really big question because in terms of governments, I think the governments among the governments they have agendas. They know
Yes.
which area they can work together to protect their interests. The people are different. So we hear from three different countries and we can talk, and like there's so many events that including youth from all over the region, and so the youth, the people are different. We reach out and we try to connect on things that we care about, but the governments are different. The officials they have their own agendas.
Agendas,
So
yes. They have their
yes,
own
so it's hard to
priorities.
say. Yeah, I don't want to generalize everyone. Yeah, yeah, and so we need to make it a distinction, and again, because the youth, it's difficult for them to get involved politically, you know in the region, in each their own country with different difficulties. So yeah, it's there's a lot of weaknesses.
Yes.
I guess.
That
I guess
the,
Lily
the
can
ASEAN could
talk
really
more
work
in
on
depth about it than I can.
How about
Wow.
you, Lindy?
When we talk about ASEAN, then the only things that comes in my mind will only the weaknesses of it, right? I think
Okay.
Lean has already covered most of it, and if we can share the strength of the its intergovernmental organizations, I think The only thing that crossed my mind is, where I travel to Thailand or
Mhm.
Malaysia or Vietnam or Myanmar
Mhm.
or wherever ASEAN countries are, I don't need visa. So that's the only
Okay.
benefit that, you know,
Okay. That's a strength. That's a strength.
that is strength. Yeah, correct.
Mhm.
That's the only benefit that I can enjoy it as the
Mhm.
people of
Mhm.
ASEAN.
Okay.
Um,
Yes.
but I think again the purpose of these free visa enter countries are also driven by economic um,
Reason.
interests, right? But at least there is something that we can enjoy from its intergovernmental organization.
Yes.
Other than that, oh my god, sea games, Lynn already mentioned, and then we can just cheer another one and another, when the competitions play. But yeah, in terms of fulfillment of human rights, in terms of you know the
Advocating
issue that we've
for.
been advocate for the people with diverse sexual orientations and
Yes.
gender identity and sex characteristic in the region is very very
Very,
far
very
away.
far from.
I think Lynn mentioned about the cultural identities that rooted in our region. I sort of agree that before its ASEAN even exists, or before its modern state even exists, the gender diversity in our region is kind of thing, right? It's a common identities that
Mhm.
cross cutting all over the nations in the region. But when the colonials comes in, says the region, yeah, and then it's become Malaysia or Brunei or Myanmar or
Mhm.
Singapore, then the 377 comes in as a penal code to condemn or to criminalize the people who have a relationship, same
Transgender
sex
gender
relationship
orientations. Yeah.
among adults. So it's kind of, so yeah.
Okay, I think you have a lot to give to us regarding that. But that's a very insightful and I mean that's also very insightful on your part, Lini. I mean, of course, the perks that we have now, and they're probably driven by economic interests, or the fact that we don't have to have visas when we travel in ASEAN countries. But there are also deep rooted issues that are also the sources of weaknesses for ASEAN that needs to be addressed, if not also given a priority. So, well, thank you for that then. And, well, now, I guess in line with the previous question, what do you think then the ASEAN as a regional body can do then to make it more felt among ASEAN peoples? If not for the political agenda of each country, then in your personal opinion, what can the ASEAN do then to make itself more relevant?
Oh, I need to think of it really.
Okay. Okay, we'll give you some time to process the question. Maybe we could ask Lynn first before we ask Lynn.
Can you say the questions again?
Well, in relation to the previous question, a while ago we talked about the weaknesses. I mean, the strengths and weaknesses, and you actually gave very insightful answers, especially with regard to weaknesses of ASEAN as a region. Now, I'd like to ask you then, in your personal opinion, how could the ASEAN then, as a regional body, what could it do so that it could be more relevant or be more felt by the ASEAN peoples or the different like us, in us who belong to the ASEAN region?
Hmm. I'm just going to talk about the people because the government, I don't think I can tell them what to do. And they
Yeah.
don't listen to people anyway.
Mhm.
Um,
They don't.
so
They don't. That's an interesting. That's an
I'm
interesting
sorry, that's just my
view of
sarcasm.
things. Yeah.
But I guess keep doing things like what you guys are doing.
Mhm.
Podcasts like this, and keep speaking up, and having people like Lini, you know, doing things what they do, and we journalists keep doing what we can, even though risking going to jails. Lini and I both know that. Today, actually, four journalists in Vietnam, I know some of them were my friends,
Mhm.
was sentenced to 2 to 4 years in prison.
Oh,
Um, yeah,
because of because of um
they're publishing
exposing
something that the
exposing
government
this.
doesn't
Mm,
like. So, I guess that's what we had to keep doing, and then inspiring people to do that.
speaking up and inspiring
Yes,
people.
keep
Yeah.
speaking up, inspiring people, and actually, I was with I was just attending the Human Rights Academy, Advocacy Academy by Forum Asia. So
Mm,
having like educational workshops and materials and tools like that available for free for the young people
with
um, in the
youth
region
and
is
such.
really helpful. Yeah, I think so.
I think it also broadens your perspective on things. I agree. I agree with you, Lynn, that it's also through these things that we learn and also have that different sense of perspective or view on things. That it's not just about the way that you see things now, but because of workshops, also seminars, or enriching ourselves with what we read. Of course, we would have to go do away with fake news and all trolls in the internet, but also just being aware and continuing to learn. That's the only way we could also educate ourselves and become more aware of the issues that are happening, especially in the ASEAN region. Yeah. What you, Lini?
Yeah, I think we need to keep pushing the our agenda to advocate the ASEAN state leaders to listen more to its people. They have this slogan, people centered, but do they really put the people in the center in each of their
Yeah.
decisions, right?
Mhm.
So we
Mhm.
need to keep.
In relation to what Lini just mentioned a while ago, I mean, sorry, Lynn just mentioned a while ago that, sometimes they don't really listen to the people. I mean, governments don't really.
Yeah, yeah. So what we can do is strengthen our solidarity among the people, um because ASEAN as a regional body, just a regional body, as Lynn said, but we the people, we are actually the center, the heart of this region, right?
Mhm. Yes.
So let's keep and pushing our agenda so that the ASEAN state leaders reminded by us, and
That they listen to us.
hopefully, yeah. But in another way, we also need to find another alternative
Mhm.
ways to strengthen our solidarity, to strengthen our movement, and to care each other as a people. Yeah. So for instance, I think Lynn earlier mentioned about Milk Tea Alliance. I
Yeah, the
think
milk tea
Milk
alliance.
Tea Alliance growing because the solidarity among the people, we in the region are care about our folks, our
Mhm.
comrades, our
Mhm.
friends, the people of Myanmar, the people of Thailand, the
Mhm.
people of Hong Kong, for instance. So we can stand in solidarity for each of the movement that they build, and they raising it. So that's what we can do.
That's a very nice point that you just mentioned, Dini. Yeah, that aside from letting our governments hear us, we also stand by others also so that we could all be heard. And I guess, yeah, I agree with you that in a way that will make ASEAN as a regional body be more felt among the people, which is the heart or the center of ASEAN itself. I'm down to my last two questions with you in this very interesting podcast. Just to break off the ice a little bit or to get to know you a little bit personally too, aside from your advocacies and the work that you do, is there any ASEAN person, any prominent person in ASEAN or in general that you look up to? And maybe if you would have to compare him or her to a character in a series or a book, who would it be and why?
Oh my god, I I think I don't have any.
Really? At this
Yeah,
point.
first of all, because I can in it's intergovernmental body. It's government
Mhm,
elites
mhm,
ruler.
mhm.
So I cannot look up to someone in the power,
Okay.
who hold the power, and sometimes we cannot hold them accountable for what they have been done for us, the
Mm.
people. So I clearly cannot look up to one of them.
Well, then, as well, I'll ask you then if as a queer feminist activist, I would like to ask you then, who do you look up to then?
Well, I think I I still and I will always remember and be remindful with
Mhm.
what Audre Lorde has been doing for
Mm.
so yeah, I will keep remind her poems, her spirit
Mhm.
of
Mhm.
struggle,
Yes,
her energy in
her
yeah, I think we need someone like her to remind us or to remind me to stay in this path.
But you mentioned Other Lord, yes, and the American writer, a feminist, a librarian, a civil rights activist, and correct me if I'm wrong, but she self-described herself as black lesbian mother, warrior, and a poet,
Correct.
right?
Yes.
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 And
She is.
she dedicated both her life and her creative talent to confronting and addressing injustices of racism, sexism, classism, and even homophobia, right?
Yes. She is. Yes.
Right. That's nice of you. Thank you, Lini. How about you, Lynn? How about you? I mean, now that we didn't, I'll just ask the question then. I mean, outside of the ASEAN context, if there's anybody that you look up to, especially as a journalist, is
I
there
I
any?
think I think there's one name in the region that everyone been mentioning lately. That
She.
everyone definitely knows.
um.
Yeah, it's Maria Ressa. I mean,
Yes. So
yeah.
you're pertaining to Maria Ressa.
Well,
She's
I'm not. I don't tend to idolize people. I
mhm,
think that's a lot of pressure on the people who get to be idolized.
mhm.
They are just human. So
Or
so
we look up to,
yeah.
or
No, but
an
yeah,
inspiration.
but I really admired her bravery and her dedication and her passion, and especially after everything she's been through, it's just amazing. It's just really inspiring. But yeah, again, I don't tend to idolize people, but if I had to name someone, she's definitely put not an ASEAN person, not a Filipino person, not about the identity, but she definitely put the issues of freedom of speech, freedom of the press,
Yes,
and
freedom of
human rights in
freedom of
general in the region
expression.
on the map
Yes.
for people, and that's what I really appreciate. Yeah, so that would be the my answer.
Oh, that's nice. I mean, especially coming from a journalist like you. Personally, also, I've well, here in the Philippines, and when I see her in the news, and especially when it was the height of her some personal issues and struggles that she had also politically because of how she expressed herself and how it was not in conformity, or at least not as pleasing as the current government is liking it. The way that she fought for it, the way that she fought for that right, for that freedom, is really admirable. And the when we found out about her receiving the Nobel Peace Prize just recently, it's really, it's not just, I agree with you, it's not just about like her being a Filipino, or her being, a recipient of this award, but it's her as a person and her advocacy and the way that she fought for it. So thank you for that, Lainey and Lynn. I guess now I'd like to ask you then, do you have any last few words or messages to our listeners for this podcast before we say goodbye?
Thank you for having me and listen to my stories and what I've been saying. But
Yes.
I guess the people who tune in to this podcast, you guys are probably special. You guys are probably doing something for the community, for the human rights issues. I guess the one thing I would say is take care of yourself before you can do anything for the world. Look after yourself first, and
That's really
yeah,
nice.
do that first, and then you can look outside and do things for people.
That's very nice, Lynn. Thank you for that. I mean, relating it to your answer a while ago, I guess before you started with your advocacy now and the work that you do, it really started personally. When your eyes were open to the different things that you were not exposed with when you were young, it started within you, and then eventually it translated to other things, and you started to broaden everything because you personally have already decided or have realized that on your own. So I guess it's the same way with us also. Before we could help others, we should definitely take care of ourselves first. That's the only way that we could move forward. I mean, loving yourself, taking care of yourself, then eventually it will translate also to taking care of others. How about you, Lenny?
Yeah, I think again, thank you so much for having me. I am delightful to be here. And for all of you who listen to this podcast, I would like to remind you that we shouldn't take, we cannot just take our life for granted, because life that we live controlled by the power that, a very systemic, and then we cannot just live like that. Yeah, so let's questions everything, start from a very near circle of our life, and then if we can do it more and more, we can do that. But at least start from our very small inner circle of our
Yes.
life.
Oh, yeah. I like that. Thank you for sharing that, Lini. That's nice. And I agree with you that we should still continue to question, ask ourselves. We could also start with our own small group, and that's where it all starts when we question also. It's not just about getting content with the system or just saying that it's okay, but also questioning and asking why. Eventually we'll be able to form our own advocacies and the things that we would like to pursue because of those things. So there, thank you for that, Lini. Well, that's all for today's episode of ASEAN People Speak. Thank you all again for listening, and thank you to Lynn all the way from Vietnam, and to Lini all the way from Indonesia for joining me today. Linny or Lynn, maybe you would want also to promote your social media accounts or website or organization for any upcoming projects. Maybe we could also take this time then.
Oh, to promote our projects or what?
Yes, yes. Or
Oh,
your website or your channel, anything.
well, I do have a YouTube channel, but maybe it's for later. It's fine.
Okay.
It's later. Yes.
How about you, Lini?
Yeah, I think for podcast listener, we do also have a podcast account on our Spotify and YouTube account. The
Mhm.
Spotify version, we call it Hear Queer Stories, and it's
Oh, hear
cover
queer stories.
yeah,
Wow.
and it's covering the story from Southeast Asian queer folks. So please go to
Mm.
Hear Queer Stories on Spotify and listen to our stories.
All right. Thank you so much for that, Lini. Thank you for that. Again, thank you so much, Lynn and Lini. Join us again next time, guys. We will talk about human rights advocacy in the past and in the present. That's going to be our next topic for the next episode. And make sure that you also subscribe to the podcast on Spotify so you never miss an episode. Also, we would like to encourage you to subscribe to our Facebook and Instagram and YouTube channel at ASEAN HR MEC and to visit our website at www.aseanhrmec.org. Again, thank you so much. This has been your host, Regine Jessica Abuel, and this has been ASEAN People Speak. Thank you and good night.